Mrs. Alexandra Kornilaki is an associate in the energy team at KBVL law firm, a member of the Deloitte legal network. Throughout her professional experience, she has contributed to a range of energy-related projects, acquiring extensive knowledge on the relevant regulatory framework.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the kind invitation of this distinguished conference. We have all acquired a lot of information regarding technological developments in the building sector during the past 2 days. And let's see now how all these developments are framed by the relevant policy and legislative framework, especially at EU level and with some specific references on Greece's legislation. The framework towards green transition has been shaped by a combination of policy-driven and legislative initiatives that work together to drive progress. The Clean Energy for All Europeans package has been considered as the first comprehensive set of measures towards energy transition, and it included important legislative instruments relating to our topic, like the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, Renewable Energy Directive, and Energy Efficiency Directive. However, the EU Green Deal package is the milestone towards climate neutrality by 2050, and it is a general plan which underlines that all sectors like energy, industry, agriculture shall contribute to fighting against climate change. The climate neutrality purpose was then written into law by the EU climate law, which also sets an intermediate target of reducing net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. And it aims to ensure that all EU policies and sectors play their part in this effort. In this context, the European Commission presented in July 2021 a set of proposals in order to obtain key legislative instruments in order to achieve this climate neutrality goal. Now the building sector is crucial to achieving these climate goals, since buildings are the single largest energy consumer in Europe. And in order to convert this statement into numbers, buildings are responsible for about 40% of the EU's energy consumption and 36% of greenhouse gas emissions from energy. However, only 1% of buildings undergo energy efficient renovation every year. And under these circumstances, the Commission launched in October 2020 the Renovation Wave strategy in order to double the renovation rate of buildings, to boost recovery and reduce energy poverty. To attain these objectives, a review of the Red Directive is required in order to strengthen the renewable heating and cooling target and introduce minimum renewable energy level in buildings. However, this objective is further secured by other provisions in EU legislation. It was also necessary to examine how the EU budget resources alongside EU ETS revenues could be used to fund national measures and investments with the aim of improving energy efficiency and energy performance of buildings. That is also the purpose of the respective directive. And the target is to achieve by 2030 that 35 million buildings are renovated and that up to 160,000 additional green jobs could be created in the construction sector. However, in the meantime, the war between Russia and Ukraine has broken up, and this necessitated even more the promotion of renewable energy and energy efficiency, energy security. For this reason, the REPowerEU framework has been adopted, which consists of three major pillars in the effort to decouple from Russia's fossil fuels. These pillars are energy-saving targets for consumers and businesses, to reduce energy bills, to make economy more resilient, and to accelerate EU's clean energy transition. The other pillar, the second pillar, was the diversification of energy supplies in order to reduce EU gas imports from Russia. And indeed, this share in 2021 was 45%, whereas in 2023, this share has decreased to 15%. And the last and more important pillar is the acceleration of clean energy use. The EU's 2030 target for renewables has been increased from 40% to 45%. The European Solar Rooftop Initiative has been introduced, which aims to make rooftop solar infrastructure mandatory for commercial and public buildings by 2025 and residential buildings by 2029. And we will focus now on the EU Energy Building Framework. I have made a categorization in relation to the target to be attained. For example, in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the key legislative instruments are the EU ETS Directive, as it's been amended in 2023, the Social Climate Fund Regulation, and the Effort Sharing Regulation. And for enhancing the energy performance and the energy efficiency in buildings, the crucial key legislative instruments are the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Energy Directive, and the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive. The EU ETS framework in general is at the core of the EU Green Deal strategy, since it is the main tool to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It was launched in 2005, it was the world's first carbon market, and it remains among the largest ones globally. It is based on a cap and trade of emission allowances. The cap refers to the limit on the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions that can be emitted by installations and sectors falling within the scope of the system. These sectors does not include the building sector in principle. However, this directive has undergone a revision twice during its fourth trading phase, one in 2018 and now in 2023. And in this context, a new self-standing EU ETS framework has been adopted, the EU ETS 2, in order to address CO2 emissions from fuel combustion in buildings, road transport, and additional sectors not covered by the initial EU ETS framework. The target is to help member states achieve their emission reduction targets under the effort sharing regulation, which also covers sectors not included in the EU ETS. So the activation of obligation concerns fuel suppliers who release for consumption fuels used for combustion in the buildings and road transport sectors. An important thing to mention is that this scheme puts the point of regulation upstream, meaning that the fuel suppliers, rather than end consumers, are required to monitor and report their emissions. The allowances will be also allocated through auctions without any possibility of reallocation, contrary to the traditional EU ETS framework. The compliance obligations will be in full effect from 2027, but the regulated entities shall hold a greenhouse gas emissions permit by the 1st January of 2025, and an approved monitoring plan as part of greenhouse gas emissions permits. In parallel, a regulation for the establishment of a social climate fund was also adopted in order to support people and businesses most impacted by the introduction of the EU ETS2. So the beneficiaries are vulnerable households, vulnerable micro-enterprises and transport users. The budget to be allocated is estimated up to 65 billion euros of funding for the time period 2026 until 2032. To be more precise, this fund will be established for the time period from 2027 until 2032, but it will be a retroactive eligibility criterion for the previous year, meaning from 2026. The obligation for member states are to submit to the Commission a social climate plan that will include measures and investments to address the impact of carbon pricing on vulnerable citizens, and they can use the revenues to endorse investments for increasing energy efficiency of buildings, building renovation rate, decarbonization of heating and cooling, and the uptake of zero and low emission mobility and transport. And the last one, legislative instrument for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, is the effort sharing regulation, which also covers non-EU ETS emissions like road transport, buildings, agriculture, small industry and waste, almost 60% of total domestic EU emissions. It shall be noted that buildings and road transport sectors will be covered under both the new dedicated EU ETS scheme and the effort sharing regulation. This regulation has also undergone an update, a revision in order to align with the current situation after the REPowerEU plan, etc. So the previous target was 29% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and now the target is 40%. New and binding national targets for each member state have been introduced according to their GDP per capita and the cost effectiveness of reducing emissions. For Greece especially, this percentage has been increased from 16% to 22.7%. And now we are going to examine the directives that concern energy performance and energy efficiency. The first one is the Energy Efficiency Directive. The proposal of a recast directive on energy efficiency was put forward by the Commission in July 2021 as part of the EU Green Deal package. And this proposal was further enhanced as part of the REPowerEU plan in order to decrease EU's dependency on fossil fuel imports from Russia. Some crucial provisions of the revised Energy Efficiency Directive are Article 3 that establishes the energy efficiency first principle, a fundamental principle in relation to the introduction of policy and investment measures which shall take the energy efficiency as a priority. There are new energy efficiency targets and national contributions. Member states shall collectively ensure an additional 11.7% reduction in energy consumption by 2030. There are indicative national contributions and a gap-filling mechanism in order to for those countries that fall behind in delivering their national contributions. There are also specific obligations for the public sector in relation to renovation of public buildings and public procurement processes. A specific percentage of heated or cooled buildings owned by public sectors must be renovated each year in order to convert them to buildings with at least nearly zero or zero energy consumption. The contracting authorities in procurement processes shall ensure that sustainable products used in this process and new buildings that address global warming potential over the full life cycle are purchased. Following that, there are specific energy saving obligations. EU countries shall achieve cumulative end-use energy savings from 2021 to 2030, equivalent to new annual savings of at least 0.8% in 2021 until 2030, at least 1.3% in 2024 until 2025, 1.5% in 2026 until 2027, and 1.9% in 2028 until 2030. There are also provisions related concerning the industrial sector, obligation of large industrial energy consumers to implement energy management systems, to monitor and optimize their energy efficiency results. There are energy audit obligations are introduced for all companies consuming energy above a certain threshold, apart from, regardless of their size. Introduction of an obligation for owners and operators of data centers with a power demand of the installed information technology of at least 500 kilowatt to monitor and report their energy performance by May 2024 and every year thereafter. There are consumer-related provisions and also provisions concerning heating and cooling aspects and specific efficiency criteria for a district heating and cooling system are set. The RED directive, as has been revised in the context of the Fit for 55 package and the REPowerEU plan, stipulates that the RES energy share in the EU gross final consumption of energy in 2030 shall be 42.5% in 2030, with an additional indicative markup of 2.5% to reach the 45% target. And in relation to buildings especially, there's an indicative target of 49% for 2030, and it also promotes the use of renewable heating and cooling systems and equipment and innovative technologies such as smart and electrified renewable heating and cooling systems, complemented where appropriate with intelligently managing energy consumption in buildings. It also increases renewable energy targets for heating and cooling with a binding increase of 0.8% per year and at national level until 2026 and 1.1% from 2026 to 2030. Finally, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the revised version of which has been adopted in May 2024, introduces the zero-emission buildings model, meaning that a building with a very high energy performance, requiring zero or a very low amount of energy. This model is mandatory for all new buildings, residential and non-residential, owned by public authorities from 1st January 2028, and from 1st January 2030 for all other new buildings, for all other new buildings. There are specific provisions for non-residential and residential buildings. Specific percentages shall be attained as well. There is an obligation for a gradual phasing out of fossil fuels, meaning that they will not be financially supported from 2025. All new buildings shall be solar ready, meaning ready to host rooftop photovoltaic or solar thermal installations at a later stage without costly structural interventions. To certify all these for a new building, there are building renovation passport schemes and energy performance certificates, who also follow a common template across all 25 EU member states. And in order to mention some things about Greece, we have also the climate law and the Energy Efficiency Act and the law on energy performance of buildings. A recent development in this framework framework is Article 32 of Law 5151 of 2024, which provides for an energy upgrade program for clusters of eligible public buildings. It's a new Article 9A of the Energy Efficiency Act. We have also the revised National Energy and Climate Plan that mentions these energy-saving obligations stipulated by the EU framework. And in order to promote the exemplary role of the public sector in improving energy efficiency of buildings, the ELECTRA program will be established. There is the promotion of efficient heating and cooling systems. However, it shall be mentioned that the rest share in cooling and heating is projected to decrease, standing at 52.6%, down from 61.1%. That's all. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kornilaki. Indeed, we wanted all the information, so you included in your presentation all the information. It's important to highlight here that all the presentations will be uploaded to ASHRAE.gr website, so you will have the chance to study a little bit more. Because as you can understand, when we speak about legislation directives, what we ask for Ms. Kornilaki is to give us all the information, so afterward you can evaluate. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.